Some people say, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. I say 2 CXOs a day makes me happy. So the reality for us is I have cultural traits that we drive. We evaluate every person at the end of the year. It's part of the review. So it's part of our process. As you scale, some place and somewhere is going to deviate. And so you're not going to be perfect.
It is generalists who could possibly navigate the world better because they know a lot about a lot of things. They are good at a few things, and that gives them the flexibility to sort of navigate.
What I did in the beginning was, hey, let's go after a greenfield area to build our brand. Let's build a company and the platform with the long view in mind, but let's first monetize. Hey, look, in the beginning, highly regulated industries, they're usually not the first to adopt. The reality is that as you scale, you need to empower and delegate. And so it's really about empowering and creating those roles as you scale that are a hybrid of, I'm not just a salesperson, I'm not a salesperson, but I'm out there selling, but I'm doing it more from an industry perspective.
Once you've hired those people, you got to keep them on brand and on culture.
Yeah.
And so that's, I guess, the follow-up question is, now that you've brought them into the fold, you made the right decision to hire those people, how do you keep everybody kind of on the same page culturally? And I'm sure it gets exponentially harder as the company gets to the size and scale that you guys are at. How did you kind of go about identifying the early sort of design partners and the right segment of the market to go after? I think this is always a challenge for founders at the earliest stage.
What would you classify as being the toughest scaling zone for Netskope, right? Was it the 0 to 20, 20 to 50, 50 to 100?
Yeah.
After a while, you have enough logos. It's all about making sure the GDR is good and the NDR is what you're optimizing.
I remember when I hired my first person, I told him, by the way, you won't be my head of sales in 2 years. And he looked at me and goes, are you trying to close me? Because that is the worst close I have ever seen.
Are there things that you've tried that have worked? Like what's working for you guys that helps you cut through the noise? And what would you tell other founders, or what are the things that other founders can do to stay above the noise? Welcome to the Unpack Podcast, the podcast for operators by operators. I'm your co-host Vignesh, and I'm a partner at Sierra Ventures.
Hey everyone, and I'm Arvind, partner at Judicial Capital and co-host of this podcast. Today, I'm really excited to have Sanjay Beri, founder and CEO of Netskope, a large privately held cybersecurity platform that delivers cloud-native security. But I'm sure there's more to it that Sanjay is going to unpack for us. Do you see the pun there?
Yes.
But what I personally find exciting about today's unpack is really that Sanjay has been there since the beginning. And last year you guys read out that you crossed more than $500 million in ARR. That's amazing. So there's really a lot of phases of growth that you have taken the company through, and I'm sure there's a lot that we could talk about: product, go-to-market, etc. And that's what this is going to be around. But let me kick it off with one. Quick question, and that is around, you've had a fascinating journey. Both from engineering roles to co-founding Ingrian Networks, and then eventually founding Netskope in 2012. And at some point, Vignesh also picked out that you were working at a help desk at the age of 16. So I think you have kind of covered the gamut of things. I guess the question there is, what were the key inflection points or learnings around that in your pre-Netskope days that kind of made you feel like this is the time, this is the moment for me. I'm going to build something big.
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me on. Great to see you all both. And it's a good question. The reality is I often feel that all of my upbringing, whether it was learning about grit and how to work, and nobody's going to give you anything, the culture that was instilled by my parents, that's actually like the first thing. Before you even start your professional career, as you build your company, you have to have a lot of guts and resilience and your integrity. And I feel that was instilled most importantly as I grew up. And so when I went into my professional career, starting when I was before I went to, quote, university, as we call it in Canada, I did work in the help desk because I get enough money to go to university. And fast forward, I really worked across the board in engineering. I worked in marketing, product, sales. I was a general manager, of a business unit over at Juniper. And so I really went across all functions. And you could say, why? Well, generally people do that when they're not good at any one thing. But the other reason you could do that too is, I'm just fascinated by building, innovating. That's what I always wanted to do. And so when I started Netscope in 2012 and I left Juniper, I felt like, all of what I'd learned, what not to do when you make mistakes, what to do, the culture that was instilled in me, and of course, the unstoppable trends of things like cloud and mobile and beyond, paired with the fact that I felt there was a big technological disruption happening in security networking that I needed to pioneer. I think all those things, that confluence, really is what led me to start Netscope, and love that I did and love what we're doing.
Sanjay, I think we will get into the details and kind of dive into a lot of the topics around how you've scaled. But I read an interesting quote from you, and I'm curious how your vision for the company has changed and morphed. But I think you said you've always believed that Netscope was going to be the processing point for all internet
Mm-hmm.
traffic, and you guys hit a really interesting spot. Obviously, starting with SaaS apps, and now that you've kind of gotten to this fairly large scale, curious how your vision and view for how Netscope ultimately unfolds is what I was curious about.
Yeah, like at a macro view, I'd always felt like that with cloud. Back then, remember, we weren't talking about AI, we are talking about cloud. If you go back to 12, I always felt like, look, cloud would disrupt and change the way the internet worked. And my view was that over time, like you sit on your laptop, you're on a phone, you're an AI agent, and there's just trillions of APIs flying all over the internet. APIs and JSON, all this stuff. And I felt like, you know what? I'm going to build something that natively understands that, can process that. And security is only as good as your understanding of what's happening and of transactions. That is at its core what it's about. And so really, to answer your question, fast forward, what we are building is really the converged network and security platform for the cloud and AI era. That's what we do. In this era, everything's different, right? The way that things converse on the internet, the fact that everyone's distributed, the fact that more data is being created in the past 2 years than in the history of time. All of these things required this new way to think about, wait, how do I think about securing that? And how do I think about delivering great end user experience, which is what a network infrastructure is around? And that's what we do, deliver that security for the cloud and AI era, but do it while accelerating traffic. And that's really converging security networking. And we're in the first inning of the market. That's my belief. And for the next 10 plus years, it'll be one of the most durable markets you'll find in all of IT.
Got it. Thanks. By the way, I must make a mention that we are proud investors at Geodesic
Yes.
Capital in Netscope.
Geodesic's been great. Anyone listening, looking for an additional investor, especially looking, frankly, expanding in Japan or growing or building, they were great partners. So.
Oh, wonderful. And no, we didn't ask.
No, you didn't. You didn't ask for it. So.
Sanjay, I think we should come to that first innings and second innings. Curious to take your view on that one, but maybe we can park that aside for a bit. But you often speak about the importance of living in the clouds and for strategic vision, and living in the trenches through direct engagement with customers and your teams.
Yep.
How do you personally have been able to balance these two critical perspectives? Again, going back to the fact that from zero to where you guys are.
Yeah, it's a great question. I've always believed that, look, when I say, you live in the cloud and live in the trenches, it's, first of all, you need to have perspective on the industry. You need to have perspective on the culture that you want to build. You have to have the EQ to understand what's happening in the world with, it could be your investors, could be your customers, could be the ecosystem. You have to have that perspective. So you can steer the ship in the right direction, right? Because you could have a lot of great people, part of your team and on that ship, but you're going the wrong direction, forget it. And so you have to live in the clouds to do that. But you also, like I have a view, you got to live in the trenches, and the trenches are a good place in this analogy. It's when, you're with your customers, you're with your salesperson, you're with your SE, right? You're with your product person, right? And your engineering team. And so, because that's where you get primary data, that's where you truly understand what's happening, whether you're trying to refine and make your post-sales experience better, understand what's happening directly with your customers and what they care about. And so some people say, yeah, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. I say 2 CXOs a day makes me happy. And so professionally, and so that's what I mean. Live in the trenches, and that's my rule, right? Every day, 2 CXOs. So
And I think that it's a good segue to a question that we've asked a lot of the other folks that we've had come on, and really that's about understanding product market fit and what it really means to be customer centric. I want to balance this question a little bit because obviously what you just talked about is a very prime example of how you be customer centric as a CEO. But I think you also said that empathy is one of the most important traits that you look for in the people that you hire and finding folks that have that ability. And I guess first question I have is around hiring people and finding the right sorts of people because as early stage investors and investors in general, I mean, there's not a single founder that we talk to that says they're not customer centric, but I think really finding people that are customer centric is important, and empathy is a core part of that. So, curious, how do you kind of test for that? What do you look for in people as you try to find people that are the right fit for Netscope?
yeah, I mean, look, I would never tell anyone that they need to build their company a certain way or have a certain culture or pick a certain set of investors. I think it's very personal, and there's sometimes there's no right way. But the way that I like to do it is I have this test. Like I got to put my head on the pillow at night, look myself in the mirror, and I got to feel good. I got to feel like I did it the right way, right? And doing the right way, in my view, means I do it in a way which is with high integrity, with being open and collaborative, being very innovative, right? And obviously making sure that our team and the people we hire are like that, and they lead that way. And part of that is having empathy for people, understanding their situation, actually perhaps caring for them, actually in the sense of understanding that everyone's a little unique, and so how do you take that into account? And those people who have that EQ along with the IQ, they're the hardest to find. It's hard to find people who have both, right? And so in many cases, you have to pick, like just like you pick, do I want the 10 out of 10 on domain, but I want the 7 on culture? I go the other way, right? I'd rather have in many cases the cultural fit. And so that's a very personal thing, and it can become a big differentiator. Your culture can become a reason people want to work here. It can become a reason customers want to work with you. Anyway, so that's how I think about that, and kind of making sure that it's just part of the fabric of your company. And I think it's very important. And I give you this one example. I just so I remember one day I was asked to come in to speak to an investor early on. It's about 10 years ago, and at that time I said, hey, I was sure, I'd love to meet you and so on. And I went in to their office. The nice receptionist put me in the room, and the person walked in to the room and said to the receptionist, "Hey, go get me some water. I'm done." That person who's a very well-known VC in the Valley, I'm done. Never working with them ever. And he turns to me and goes, "So, why are you here?" After the person asked me to come for so long, and that's what I mean. Like, you got to pick people that you want to work with, and that you can look yourself in the mirror and go, you know what, I want those people to be part of my team and partners. And you can self-select, and you got to have the guts as an entrepreneur to not listen, perhaps not to your heart, and just do what you know is right. And that's not always what people would tell you, because others would say you got to go, partner with that person, right? They're I won't say it on the podcast, the word I was going to say, but but no, you don't have to. So, anyways,
I think that's actually a really it's a good anecdote, and I think it's really important. And I mean, this the journey is definitely long, and it's never a straight line up. So
yeah,
you want to have people that are there with you in the trenches that you can disagree with and still go back and have a beer with. So I
yeah,
totally appreciate
totally,
that.
yeah, totally.
The flip side of that, though, is from a hiring perspective, because I think, look, when you're making an investor decision, it's a little bit different because it's a little bit more of like I guess, a market decision. You talk to a bunch of folks, and so maybe a little bit different. But when you're hiring, obviously every investor and any other CEO, coach, or advisor will always tell you go hire A players.
Yeah,
But the A player thing may clash with who's the right fit for the company, and of course we can argue over what the right definition of a player is.
Yes.
But I'm curious, like, how do you kind of fight that urge, and really like more of a what advice would you give to other founders that you were advising as to how to fight that urge and make sure that they find the right people and that are a fit for their company?
Yeah. It is a great question. And first of all, it doesn't hurt to have made a mistake because then you'll remember it for the rest of your life. So I know that's not the answer you're supposed to give, the textbook answer, but the reality is that, look, when you go throughout your career, I'm going to guess most every entrepreneur or person has had the experience where, for whatever reason, they perhaps hired that, quote, the name, right? Or the A player, as someone else termed them, A. Um, and then they realized, like, darn, I should have just done what I thought, or I should have assessed that better, or I should have. And so what I tell folks is, like, look, you obviously have your gut and your heart, but you have others around you trust who can evaluate. You have background checks you talk to people who work with this person, and you do all of that, and you get that data and primary data, and you should have a view of if they're going to be a fit. And don't get pressured into hiring that person, because in the culture that you want, which is what you filter on, that's what's going to matter. And the second thing is, never go for the name. So many times people have tried to pressure me to say, go for this person, look at their name, look at what they do. And the reality is that in some cases they're the right people, but in others it's like, oh no, like I want to hire for substance, right? And so I want to hire a cultural fit, not for the name. And I think you got to have the guts to do that. In many cases, that means not listening to your investors and your board. You're there for a reason, right? But the reality is, the good investors and the good board members, they know that, right? And they've been around. They have good cultural fabric, and so you won't run into it as much with those people. And so,
So the I guess the next step then is, once you've hired those people, you got to keep them on brand and on culture.
yeah.
And so that's, I guess, the follow up question is, now that you've brought them into the fold and you made the right decision to hire those people, how do you keep everybody kind of on the same page culturally? And I'm sure it gets exponentially harder as the company
Yeah.
gets to the size and scale that you guys are at. So any lessons there?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, like, one, just pragmatically, is that you have to live it and lead. And so, like, we're thousands of people, and all over the world, and
Hmm.
so the reality for us is, one is, I have cultural traits that we drive. We evaluate every person at the end of the year on them. It's part of the review, so it's part of our process. It's not just written on our walls. It is written on our walls, but they know that, hey, you know what, this actually matters. Like, they're going to review people on it. Then when you hire people and your leaders, you want them to lead and espouse that and drive that, so they hire that way, and so on. And so it's really not one thing. For me, for example, I hold three every month or a month and a half. I hold 3 or 4 open dialogues, and different geos and different functions, so different time zones. And I just get on. There's no agenda. They can ask whatever they want, right? They literally now, and they've always just asked everything, no holds barred. And that also is about living in the trenches, but creating an environment where people can feel free to do that. The only other thing I tell you is, like, as you scale, someplace and somewhere is going to deviate, and so you're not going to be perfect, right? And you just have to have a system and people, and the ability to stomp out that and correct it. And then lastly, like, to be clear, like, a culture doesn't mean everyone's the same. In fact, it's the opposite. Everyone can be different. They may have different styles where they discuss things, where they disagree, and there's lots of people and places where you'll disagree, and it's just that you promote that, and you leave the room, virtual room or room, kind of aligned. And so that's the other thing. Don't mistake, like, having this culture of openness and collaboration and transparency for the fact that you don't have all of those debates and dialogues and disagreements.
We clearly have a lot of questions on team, but maybe I'll layer on one. And this is personal to me, because I think I align with this school of thought. I'm not sure whether you've read or come across a book called Range
Mhm.
by David Epstein, who argues that in a very complex world, it is generalists who could possibly uh, navigate the world better because they know a lot about a lot of things. They are good at a few things, and that gives them the flexibility to sort of navigate. And just given you have seen zero to a lot of scale in this company, would you say that has some truth to the kind of people that you brought on and been successful in your organization? And maybe it depends on the different scales of businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it really does depend, and I'll explain why. Like, so for example, for myself, understanding and being deep on the go-to-market side, being able to talk to customers and sell and market and talk to analysts, investors, yet also understand the product and engineering and have background in finance, like that helps, right? And so you could argue, okay, that's a generalist, um, and that really does help. But then when I think about somebody who's building a product, who's running engineering, yes, I guess it helps that they understand of empathy and culturally that they have that general cultural traits. But do they need to be an expert in how sales and go to market works and finance? Not necessarily, right? In fact, in some of these roles, the domain is so big. Like if you just think about building a product or engineer, you think about sales or running your SE team or post sales org. Um, some of those in of themselves are so deep in having to understand all the nuances and how the interplays happen that what I would say is you do want them to be really good at their domain, what they do or function, and then um, very cognizant that they don't know necessarily what the other teams are best at. Meaning, like as long as they understand, yeah, I'm not the best at sales, I'm not the best at it. They want to learn and they want to work with them, but they respect that. Hey, that's a different craft. I'd rather have that many times versus just too many generalists. Because ultimately, like, maybe in the beginning when you're 3 or 4 people, like every person's got to sell, they all got to build. But as you scale, like generally, that you move away from that to people who really know specific function domain, work well with the others, and then have the EQ and humbleness to understand that those people are great at their craft and you can learn from them.
Got it. Now, thanks for that. I guess maybe this is a nice segue to move into product and innovation. I mean, maybe I'll bring in that earlier point you mentioned about first innings and second innings. Very curious to learn about what do you think about the second innings, and maybe you'll clarify what the first innings was also.
Yeah.
Uh, but I mean, yeah, maybe this is an opportunity to sort of help us understand, the audience understand, like Netscope's beginnings, the product, and then how everyone talks about a platform, but you guys have built it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, happy to talk through. So when I said first innings, a lot of people will look at me and go, "What are you talking about? Like, how can you be in the first inning?" When I said first, I meant, look, I have always a much broader perspective. I want to go long, and so when I say first innings, I mean the first innings of the transformation of security and networking, which is this many hundreds of billions-dollar market, and
mm,
over the next decade, the mass migration to a different set of architectures and tools. So that's like a very grand perspective. In our company, the reality is when I started this company, had a view that we would become, the new data fabric, the new network, the new security for the cloud and AI era. That was the view, right? Cover all traffic, all internet, all on-prem, all these services, and want to build this the biggest network in the world, the fastest. Solve this performance issue. Solve that you get security and you make performance worse. Make it the opposite. That's what I wanted to do. Now, and I went long on building it, right? But the reality is when you start pragmatically selling, nobody's going to go buy that from you, that vision. They're like, who are you? They're like, wait, Netscope or is it Netscape? So it's like, no one knows who you are in the beginning. And so, what I did in the beginning was, hey, let's go after a greenfield area to build our brand. Let's build a company and the platform with the long view in mind. But let's first monetize, right? The place where we can get in, succeed, build a brand, grab customers, and that fuels the rest. But don't ever do something with the short game in mind. And so that's what we did, which is really going after SaaS, right, in the beginning. Whereas our grander view was, hey, we're going to cover all traffic. We're going to have, now we have over 20 products on our platform. We started with one. But the advantage that we have is that we went long on building a platform. So as a result, we could build it and we could actually do it versus you go and just try to build one module and then you try to like expand. You would have to re-architect. You'd have to rethink your go-to-market. You'd have to rethink your plan. So we didn't necessarily have to do that. And that took a special type of investor, took a special type of thinking around your go-to-market, like partners in the beginning, stay loyal, build partnerships, don't ever go direct. And it takes a lot of work on the product platform side to kind of work on things that maybe you don't see the light of day for years. Like as a small, when you're building your company, go try to walk into a boardroom and go, hey, by the way, I'm going to build the largest network in the world. It's going to hire like the people who built the largest networks, like from AWS. They built the largest CDNs. I'm going to spend, I won't tell you how much. And by the way, yeah, you're not going to see the value for 3-4 years. So, okay. Most investors are like out the door. But that's okay, right? If you have a grander view, you want people around the table who have a grander view and are aligned.
Yeah. Sanjay, I feel like I truly can ask you this one because I think you guys have been building this for a few years here. Everyone talks about, oh, I'm a platform company, right? But I think you folks have built it. But the question there is, to your last commentary around, hey, go into a boardroom and say, I'm going to spend so much to build this platform where we don't know the customers are going to come. So the question is, how does the discovery happen? That, look, this product is working and this is where the puck is moving and we're going to go and invest here to build the next set and the next set and the next set.
Yeah, I think look, the reality is as I mentioned, first you get your foothold and you prove that, okay, you have this platform with these components and wow, okay, people are buying it. They're using it. We get it. And then when you layer on your next phases, which you had planned, the reality is ideally like what you've structured, go to market wise. Okay, it's the same sales team. It's the same channel. I'm going to leverage what I built go to market wise. On the platform product side, the reality is that you would have some feedback that customers and prospects would go, yeah, I would do that with you if you were able to do that. You're going to have some people who say, no, I'm not, because they just don't believe like, how can you do that? You're going to go fight that vendor who's entrenched. I don't know. And so I think you also have to marry some of that primary validation with your own belief and conviction in what's happening in the industry. Because, I can tell you, like, there are things that when we went in to build our, release our second and third product, there was 90% of people who said, no, like, that's crazy. You can't do that. And so I think you just have to have conviction. You have to have deep understanding of the market, which is why I believe, in high tech, you got to understand your domain. And if you do that, then, things will, if you do them right, will work out. So
I guess maybe let me ask the same sort of question, but bring it back to the early days of Netskope, and would love to hear a little bit about how did you kind of go about identifying the early sort of design partners and the right segment of the market to go after. I think this is always a challenge for founders at the earliest stage. Because, it's probably easier to go after, startups or small companies. It's not easy to go after enterprises, but, maybe building for the enterprises sometimes has its benefits in the early days because you build a more robust product, even if it takes more time. Maybe just walk us through kind of how you made those decisions in the early days of the company.
Yeah, just so, and as background, we went after mainly what I would say is enterprises. We were not the SMB company. We went after enterprises, large enterprises. And frankly, I chose that, one, because I felt like, hey, we were going for sort of this best of breed platform with deep capabilities. It would resonate more over time with them. And then the others would kind of catch up to that. The second was obviously just go to market efficiency. I felt like, hey, enterprise sales cycles, everybody knows, you don't go to a website and click buy, right? You got to go sell. And if I'm going to do that, you have to do that in the mid-market too. I felt like the return on that would be, better. So it was a mix of product and also our go-to-market strategy. And then as far as like within that segment, you have to pick a couple of things. First, you got to pick your geo because you can't stretch yourself too thin. And ideally, you want your customers, frankly, in the beginning, right, closer. And so I started more in North America and the US. We went early to Europe and APAC later, and built a mass business there. We started there. And then you got to pick your verticals. Like, hey, look, in the beginning, highly regulated industries, they're usually not the first to adopt, right? And so you're going to be picking perhaps some verticals which are more forward leaning, like in our case, cloud first, right? And so, you look at areas like high tech. You would look at areas in some cases, even in healthcare, where they really needed a solution for this. And so we picked verticals and geos that really would lean to being, in that case, cloud first, way back when. We picked places that we knew we could support and give them extra care because you're doing a little more agile development in the beginning. And so we stayed in North America. And then I think the last big piece is you also look for, in our case, like CIOs, CISOs, like the people at these companies, right, who are in many cases of the new breed, right? They're not stuck in their ways where they're like, oh, I've had this for 10 years, I never want to replace it. I don't believe in cloud. So you have to look for the right personalities too, right? Who can be those 12 years ago first movers. And so I think it's a combination of all those, and that's what we did, and got our first base, and then it kind of keeps going because as time move on, those other verticals come in. The other folks who maybe are not the first movers from a CIO or CISO perspective, they watch what their peers do, they move in, and then you go to the other geos where you can run that play over again.
Sanjay, I think we kind of moved a bit into GTM, and that's my favorite thing to talk about. Love to double click on a couple of topics. I mean, again, you're in rarefied air because you have seen that scale from zero to north of half a billion, as you highlighted last year. Um, I think as there are a couple of questions. So the first question is, as a founder CEO, how much in the product, in the GTM, do you like to get involved, and what has best worked for you? Because I mean, you've been a product person, and then it's often difficult to not do that if
Yeah.
that's your first thing. That would be helpful to unpack a
Yeah,
bit.
it's a good question. And so, first of all, I think like if you've been in product and if you've been in go to market, you realize how important good leaders there are. And the most important thing is, find great people in each of those roles. There's product management, there's engineering, your global sales, your SE, or customer success. And so one is, okay, that was my first priority, is to find those type of people, and then under it. But then, yes, I do like to get engaged in both. Like I am on the go-to-market side, deep in our sales process, deep in understanding how do we on-ramp people quick, how do we hire, what type of people do we want. And yes, I will definitely in the product side go in and work with our team. And that's just like how I like to do it. It's not how perhaps, it's not a playbook, but it does allow you to make sure that we are innovating at our scale and focusing on the other things. Could be resilience or quality or other, and finding the right balance. And if you live in the trenches, you will understand and be able to make those decisions better. Could be capital allocation, could be the type of people you need. I'm a believer you do need to like skate to where the puck is going. And that is one important part. Like as a CEO, you do need to know your industry. And so you also need to be able to make investments knowing that, wait, this is where I need to go 2 years, 3 years from now. And you can't just rely on others to think, about that, because they may not be able to figure out like, wait, I don't have people to do this. I don't have people to do it.
Mm.
So you got to allocate that properly. And similarly on the go to market, like, look, you sell to a Fortune 2000 company, they want to see you. Like they want to know, like, who are these executives? They want to see your leadership bench. And so I think it's just natural to do that. And I think it's very important and helps everybody in the company loves it. I mean, your people will love it that you're so engaged. Your customers will love it. Your partners will love it, and you'll love it, hopefully, right? And so, and I do, and so it just works. It's a good flywheel for us. So.
So I have a follow up to that actually on how do you manage to stay, in the trenches, but also be able to kind of cover as much ground as you have to cover? Because look, if every salesperson at your company had it their way, you'd be involved in all the deals
Yeah.
and help them close and be a part of it. It's just not possible. So how do you kind of balance that load? How have you kind of trained the trainers and kind of built up your sales leaders and product leaders to be able to
To do that.
take your role?
Yeah. So first of all, like the reality is that as you scale, you need to empower and delegate, and you need to, and I don't like the word delegate because what you actually want is you want to bring on people who love what they do and who can actually play that role, who can be the leader, who, for example, can go talk to a CIO or a CISO or CTO. They can sell, yet they can understand the industry and domain. And so I think, like for us and for me on the go-to-market side, it was about bringing and making sure we had those people. Whether those were field CTOs, those were field leaders, they were product folks who loved getting out in the field, right, and selling. Your CIO team, your IT team being like your first customer, right, using Netscope on Netscope, getting out there. And so that's what we did is we have out there, like I have CIOs by region who are out there selling. I have CISOs by region who are out there selling. I have product people who love to get out and we make sure they get out. We have field CTOs who are out there. And so it's really about empowering and creating those roles as you scale that are a hybrid of I'm not just a salesperson, I'm not a salesperson, but I'm out there selling, but I'm doing it more from an industry perspective. So it really helps scale go to market. And then there's many other examples of that. And the same thing on the product side. Like you bring in people who live and breathe a certain thing. Like I started Netscope AI Labs. We started 7 years ago. I mean, those people, I love them. They live and breathe this. They will come to you saying like, this is what we need to do. Like, this is what we should do. This is what we should build. They're so passionate, right? And the people who run those teams, they're really rare, but if you can get them, you really can scale, right? And that's what I think we've been able to do is just get the right people in each of those areas who can really lead.
And I'm sure that that profile has changed over time, and you've tried to look for different people. I guess a couple questions on this front. One, has as you've kind of gotten to scale, how have you thought about the right sort of profile? Has the profile of those sorts of people changed? That's part of it, and then the other part of it is on empowering partners and channels, because you need to drive scale. So maybe talk about what have you done internally, how have you kind of made changes to how you think about the right people,
Yeah.
and then how have you thought about the timing for when you enable partners and channels to really help drive scale?
Yeah, it's a good question, the reality is that I'll give an example, like sales, right? As you scale, in the beginning, you have a player coach, and they're selling, and they're driving, and they got a quota, yet they're building their team, and then as you scale, you build in managers, and then you segment, and you have your east and southeast and northeast, and you create regions, and then you just keep going, right? Segmenting. But one of the key things as you do that is you have to figure out to yourself, like, what kind of people do I want? And for us, we want hunters. So in the go to market side, even though, yes, the person who runs my ran North America for Mandiant or Google, or my person who runs, Mia ran it for Pan or Palo Alto, or person who ran X ran it for Mac. I mean, they've been at scale, but in their heart, they are hunters, right? And they are not just there to process and manage. They need to be able to be good at that. But in our case, right, we need people who can hunt too. And because, we're not 100,000 people, right? Salespeople and X. And so I think just perspective that you often, like in our case at our scale, you want a mix of on the go to market. People can hunt, but can do it at scale and operationalize it, and can recruit and retain that way, and have the EQ and IQ to do that, which is very different than someone you may hire, to run like a 50,000 person sales org,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
just understanding.
Maybe just before we talk about the partner piece of it, I guess looking back on the whole Netscope journey, would you have changed the way you thought about hiring your early people, knowing what you now know, or would you
Hmm.
have more or less done the same thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say on the go to market side, um, in the beginning, you aren't going to be able to attract the people that you want right now. That's just if I look back, right? Um, and so when I was starting, when you had nothing, you had no sales, you had no customers, you're hiring really like in the sales side, you're hiring a rep, right? You're not hiring I mean, I remember when I hired my first person, I told him, by the way, you won't be my head of sales in 2 years. And he looked at me and goes, are you trying to close me? Because that is the worst close I have ever seen. And I said, well, look, oh yeah, maybe I'm too transparent, but you know what I mean, right? Like if we do what we're going to do.
No, I don't.
So, and this person actually went, yeah, you know what? I know what you mean. So, and so I think like, I don't know, I wouldn't change that because I don't think that they would have been the right people. Like if I tried to hire the people I hired later, earlier, and I don't think they would have been happy, right? And either. And then on the product side, like I'll give you an example. My CTO has been with me since the beginning. Like, and I wouldn't change like for the world. He's able to scale. He's able to get out there. He's able to, and so on. Now, have we made mistakes along the way? Absolutely. Like for example, you fall into that trap of that name or the X, and so I definitely look back and will go, yeah, I wouldn't have done that. And so there's a lot of mistakes along the way. What I tell people, and I show this slide in my all hands, it's like when you look 100 feet away, like a lot of people look at your company and they go, oh, wow, that's a straight line up and to the right. That's great. When you're in, it's a jagged line up. So when you're in the company and the ups and the downs could be, wrong person. It could be something in the market. It could be get gut punched, but that's just normal. So, yeah. And then on the partner side, you asked me. So this is about going long, go to market wise. In the beginning, because of my history, I knew that, look, partners in this case, like resellers, VARs, distributors, so on, right? You have to choose. Are you going to be a company that works through partners or not? And I'm pretty binary about it because you have to show loyalty to your partners. You can't
Mm.
go around them. As soon as you go around them, first of all, you broke your integrity and then they're not going to trust you. And so I chose in the beginning, I'm going to work through partners, going to fulfill through partners, and I'm going to feed them and educate them. And once they get fed and they get educated, they're going to start going, wait a minute, I'm going to bring you business. But they're not going to do that in the beginning, right? You have to have that and have the resilience to just power forward with that strategy because you believe in the partners. And so that's what we did in the beginning, and we've done it ever since, right? Um, and the easy way, many people would tell me, like, why are you doing that? Like, you're giving away 15%, 20% of your ARR in the
Mhm.
beginning. And I said, yeah, because I'm going long. I believe in this. And so that's an example how I think about partners from that landscape. The other partners are technical partners, ecosystem partners, and I'm a believer in being open. And I think from a customer vantage point, that's what they want. They want flexibility and the ability for people to play well with each other. And so I'm a big believer in that ecosystem.
Got it. I think, you know, I often GTM is my point of interest.
Mm.
And again, what would you classify as being the toughest scaling zone for Netscope? Right? Was it the 0 to 20, 20 to 50, 50 to 100?
Yeah.
After a while, you have enough logos. It's all about making sure the GDR is good
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
NDR is what you're optimizing for.
how about all of them? So, I mean, I know I'm supposed to give you the answer. Well, that one was easy, but look, I mean,
That's a cop out, but not allowing you that.
yeah,
So maybe
no,
you have to
I
pick.
mean, they all are in their own ways. Like
Mm,
they're all different. Like the beginning, you're just scrounging, you're trying to build a name, get your first cut. Later, you're trying to scale, you go to market, and you have to change many of your or up level many of your leaders, and so. But I think like also like situationally and aware. Like for us, um, we went through a few years ago. You had the pandemic, you had an X that ripped all events
mhm,
out of the world. Every event gone, right? And for a company that's trying to build its awareness, right, that's kind of spreading the news about Netscope, wow, we have this great platform. Our whole focus was at bats. We knew if we got in at bat, we would win. It was just, but yeah, everyone doesn't know us. And when the pandemic hit, that made it hard because I know it may sound the opposite, but the reality is if you're just trying to continue to build your awareness and you can't meet people in person, there's no events which generate a significant amount of interest and so on, you have to totally change your motion. You have to change it to
mm,
digital. You have to train your people to be able to build relationships virtually. You have to, and so that was probably like for us like a big, okay, we got to figure out how to do this, right? um, and if you're another company and you have that, you're 50,000 people, you have all this awareness, probably helped you because your customers were less, prospects were less willing to look at new things, right? And you're like, that's great, just stay with us. And but for an organization and a company that's building, um, that was definitely a place where we had to really grit down.
I guess it's an interesting point that you make, and I'm thinking about this a little bit in the context of AI and AI hyper awareness by customers. I mean, you guys had it a little bit right with Shadow IT back
Yep.
when you guys founded the company, and that was a really good way to message and kind of get your early growth engine going. I'm curious in this world with how noisy everything is and like everything from cyber to to productivity tools. Are there things that you've tried that have worked? Like what's working for you guys that helps you cut through the noise? And what would you tell other founders, or what are the things that other founders can do to stay above the noise?
Yeah, I mean, so if you sell to mid to large enterprises, because we're B2B, we don't sell to consumers, and we're not selling to like a 100-person shop per se. Um, I think like they value a couple things. One is they do value that you're not just riding the latest marketing and trend and washing things. Like you're not AI washing. You're not just like I think they value the authenticity and the substance. I really do. I think they do. And I think like CISO, CIO, CTOs, like they value that. They value that people who talk with substance, talk pragmatically, talk about reality. And I think there's a lot of marketing out there which actually turns them off. Which is people latch on to the latest thing, and suddenly that feature you thought was something else is suddenly an AI feature. Like wait, what? That you just changed the name, and so I think they value like integrity. It happened one of the things I was this app we were using, and then we turned one day we looked and wait, you just changed the name to say that this is an AI score. What? um, and so I think like if you play the long game, people realize that you build your brand through these cycles by being authentic and by being real. So that's one, right? Is we're not going for transactional awareness. I don't care about that because that's not going to build your relationship with these customers, for the long term. And so I think like for us, what has worked is we speak to the real business value. So we know our audience. It's a CIO. Okay, well, what are they thinking about right now? Well, they're thinking about at some point cost and consolidation. They're thinking about agility. I want to leverage AI. I want to use these great applications, but how do I do that and meet my privacy and regulatory and data problems? Like, how do I solve this problem? And so we message to that use case. That's what we do. And so I think like for us, what's worked is message to the use case, message to their need, tune that by audience. So, because a CIO thinks about something very differently than a CISO and a head of networking. And so you got to tune it that way, but speak their language, and don't just go sell your technical feature function in what you do. You got to resonate with them, and that we have actually throughout our history like become better at that. You could argue like even earlier we would sometimes just talk about our technical capability, right? And well, maybe we shouldn't be doing that. So I think we've also matured in that respect, to be frank.
I was hoping you'd have a silver bullet answer, but I think it's very practical, and I think it's something that bears repeating all the time.
Yeah, no silver bullet. If there was, hey, if you ever find one, let me know.
Sounds good.
So,
I always joke that cyber makes me a bit dizzy. All the alphabet soup
yeah,
that goes around. You folks have built out a platform. Now, this conversation would be amiss if we didn't talk about the landscape and competitive positioning and all the beautiful stuff. So, how would you characterize where Netscope is in today in its journey, and
yeah.
how you see the landscape evolving, I suppose, and Netscope's role there?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, so, look, in security networking, nobody wants one platform. And I remember speaking at this conference I was asked to speak about platforms. And, nobody wants 100, but nobody wants one, right? Nobody wants to be locked into one. Nobody wants a closed platform. And nobody wants price list integration where you go, hey, buy it from me because it's on my price list. But, it's a Frankenstein set of products. Most people, when they think about a platform, they think about, okay, you do consolidate and converge many things that make sense to consolidate and converge. It's operationally easy. You have one of everything, one console, one engine, one network. And so it actually is a platform. It's not just a bunch of stuff stuck in an ELA or a price list. And so I think like the definition of what a platform is really important. And I think there's been a lot of platform washing by people kind of acquiring things and sticking them on a price list and saying, hey, we're a platform. And so one is how we think about ourselves is we converge, consolidate what is the market of data and network security, one of the biggest markets in security and networking. And so, and we deliver security for this new era of cloud and AI, and we do it while accelerating people's traffic. That's kind of the use case for people. And the reality is 90% plus of what people have today is complete legacy. And so it's been built over 25 years. And the reality is for the next 10 plus years, they're going to be, their North Star is to move to something that is built for this new era that changes how they thought about data network security. But they'll be pragmatic and they'll do it in steps. And that's why I say it's one of the most durable, highest CAGR markets for the next 10 years, because you got so much pent up legacy. And for us, our focus is on innovate or die. Half the company is pretty much R&D. And so for us, like, we don't fight against really private companies. We fight against like public, been around a long time companies, right? They got 10 times more salespeople, right? They have had the benefit of building relationships for a long time. And so while we have a certain scale and we're thousands of people and we have over a third of the Fortune 100 and we have, the reality is we fight sort of the kind of one or two Goliaths, right? And so for us, our strategy has always been to be the best platform, be the innovator, right? Because we know go-to-market wise, we'll never have as many feet on the street as they do. And so that's why I said our nirvana is just get a customer to try it, get them to a POC. If we do that, we're golden. And that's harder than said because you got to get in. And so for us, where I look at it, where we are is we're in a mass awareness build. Like continue to scale our awareness, broaden those at bats. Don't be the 15% R&D player, right? We're going to lean into innovation. We've seen too many companies, you can name them, right? The graveyard of security networking who didn't innovate, and so we'll be the innovator. And as a result, we will power our way into companies. They'll try it, they'll like it, and that's our focus. So,
no, I think it's great to hear, and I think it's important to have leadership that appreciates and understands the need for innovation even at scale.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the one last question I have for you on the future of how you see the world. It's kind of interesting. There's some parallels to the shadow IT world that you're kind of seeing in AI, and I don't know
Yeah.
if we call it shadow AI, maybe more of a innovation budget. I think it might be what people call it, but people adopting AI and putting in data, and then there's the other part, which I think is a small part of what you're maybe a smaller nuance of what you said, but it's how do you make sure that you accelerate AI and make sure from the network perspective to make sure that whatever you're delivering from an application perspective or whatever you're using ultimately has a better experience. And I guess the question that I have is it's we're probably earlier on that second part than we are on the first part, which is adoption of AI tools. But would love to hear your view on how that market is shaping. What are you seeing in
Yeah.
terms of demand on those two fronts for those products?
Yeah. I mean, so if you parallel the cloud world when we started, people had like on average in the large enterprise had 1,000 cloud apps, and IT didn't own 90% of them. Right? They're brought in by business units and end users. And the reality is the same thing with AI, right? End users and business units rule the world, right? And they use what they want to use. And IT, like you can't walk in if you're an IT and say, "Hey, I'm sorry, you can't use AI." They're like, "Well, no matter what you say, they're going to use it." So I think people realize that, right? That you're not the doctor no anymore. You are the doctor yes and yes, you can use it, and here's guardrails. And so, like what we found, we have over 1,000 customers plus who use us to protect AI. And the reality is, it was one of the most fastly adopted, use cases for us. And the reality is, like, I would sit in rooms, boardrooms, and the person would say, like, I don't get it. Like, why are you just making me block ChatGPT or allow it? Like, why is it that's my option? Block Gemini or allow it. Like, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to use it, but I want to force folks not to be able to use it with sensitive data or not use a public LLM. Like, I don't want the block or allow concept. And so what we have seen, because what we do is we don't force people to have the block or allow. We force people, like, we allow them to set business policies they want. Like, oh, it's easy, point and click. Oh, you want to use Gemini, but you only want them to use a corporate instance and you don't want to query with sensitive data. Bam, you're done. And then you can generalize that. I want you to do that for all of generative AI. And so I think, like, what we have seen is there's a ton, because we discover it in the product, shadow AI, apps using AI, LLMs that you don't know about, private and public, co-pilots and agents. I mean, it's all over the place and it's unstoppable. And so first, rip your blindfold off. So just like you did with cloud, we rip your blindfold off so you know what is being used. Then number two, don't say no. Shut down the egregious ones, like in the cloud world, shut down FreakShare and allow the normal one. but but then let people use it, and just don't use the block or allow philosophy, right? Use the yes and here's the guardrails. Oh, you can't use it with sensitive data. You can only use the corporate version. Um,
Mm.
we have seen massive uptick in it. I just came back from my customer advisory board meeting last week. Hot topic. I was at RSA a couple of weeks ago. It took like 8 minutes before people asked me about, okay, how do we help us discover and secure yet enable AI, right? And so it's a very hot topic, and I think it's the end users and IT kind of, and letting end users and groups do what they want, yet doing it securely. That's the key.
I've just one follow up on that, and one of the things I've always found interesting about this whole AI wave is, I mean, how closely the big companies are all paying attention to it. I mean, even with cloud, everybody talked about it, but it still felt like it kind of came out of nowhere. I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of the small companies are doing it, and then the big companies finally realized at the end. But I mean, you're seeing with Microsoft and even Palo Altos and
Mhm.
AWSs and Google's. Everybody knows AI is here and AI is coming.
Yeah.
And I'm curious your perspective on how do you guys, as a not a small company, a scaled company, but still a more nimble company than those guys, how do you guys manage to win the war and really stay ahead of the pack?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, like, our lineage and background is we're traditionally do things organically, right? And one of the advantages we found with with securing AI is because we built everything we did as like a component, a service, microservice within our company. When you think about AI, oh, I want to protect my data. Well, we created the world's best kind of data protection engine. It's the same engine. the most common query on generative AI is check my source code. Well, I was looking for source code in in other places a long time ago. Um, the ability to make it fast. We run now the world's largest cloud network from security. Well, that just you leverage that again. And so I think like one of the things that you could say that it was planned, you could say it was lucky, is that these components that we built, the network, the data protection, the malware, threat prevention, the behavior, like they all apply in the AI world. And our teams that built our products to secure AI, like they leverage all that. So 80% of the work they had to do to govern generative AI or LMs or RAGs, it's already done for them, right? Because if you built it properly as a platform, you don't have to just try to build something from scratch. And the customers love it because just like they worked with us to protect web traffic or cloud and protect their data and threats, but they can use the same data protection, threat protection for AI now. And so I think that's how we've been able to do it. We get a lot of marginal leverage now, meaning like the cost for us to develop a new product is much less than it was 8 years ago when all these platform components weren't built out. So
Hmm. Well, I'm always mindful of the
yeah,
time of founders and operators, but we covered good ground just for the audience's benefit. We talked about the founding journey. We talked about go-to-market channels and scaling of business to where Netscope is, and also product and innovation and staying relevant for the next innings, as Sanjay put it. And we always like to end off talking this section. One of the D's in Unpacked is decompress,
yeah,
and that's what we like to talk about. Is what do founders operators do to sort of decompress and come back the next day, just getting into the trenches and taking on the fight, right? So I'm using a bunch of
yeah,
the words that you've used. So with that, Sanjay, what is it for you? How do you like to sort of
yep,
decompress?
yeah. It's a great question. So one is, look, I love spending time with my family, spending time with my daughter, my wife, just hanging out. I love, I love. You see my background. You'll see. I didn't show you all the background, but it's a
Hockey.
bunch of sports. I love sports
No, it's sports.
personally.
Okay.
Whether it's basketball or it's baseball or it's tennis or it's hockey, although my Leafs did not do well this year again in the second round. But anyways, that's another story. The but and so it's the family, friends, marry it with sports, and you can, and I love that, right? And if you have a passion for something else, um,
Mm.
it frankly really lets you decompress. I have a saying too, like sometimes like you can compartmentalize things, and maybe that's like a good asset that some people have, and I have that.
Mhm.
Sometimes that's actually it doesn't always work at home when you compartmentalize things too much. But I think it's also just having grounding, family, your passion, your friends, your hobbies, and I love that. And so that's what I do to decompress, and it's great.
Yeah, nothing beats some family time for
Yeah,
sure. Well, Sanjay, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a really nice conversational recording. So, really, I'm sure there's a lot of nuggets there for the audience to pick out
great.
from. Thanks again
Yeah,
for being on the spot.
great.
Thanks again,
Thank you.
Sanjay.
Thanks for having me. All right, take
And
care.
I will say this: I know you feel bad about the Leaves. I feel just as bad about the Warriors.
Oh yeah, I that too. The Raptors and the Warriors.
Yeah, exactly.
We just have to drop that
Yeah.
in for sure.
Okay.
All right, Sanjay.
All
Thanks
right.
again.
Take care. Yeah. Bye bye.